Connor adjusted his hard hat, squinting against the flickering fluorescent lights that barely illuminated the steel beams and tangled cables around him. The overnight shift at the construction site wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. He grabbed his tablet and began logging his inspection notes. He paused as a low rumble resonated through the air, too steady and rhythmic to be normal machinery. "Did you hear that?" he called out, glancing toward Mark, his coworker, who was sitting on an overturned bucket a few feet away. Mark looked up from his sandwich. "Hear what?" Connor gestured toward the unfinished section of the site. "That sound. Like pulsing or something. Maybe a generator's acting up." Mark frowned, setting down his sandwich. "We don't have any generators running tonight. Everything's shut down until the morning crew arrives." Then what? Connor stopped as the sound grew louder. It wasn't mechanical. It was odd, resonating in a way that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Mark stood, brushing crumbs from his hands. "You think it's coming from the new tower section?" "Could be. Let's check it out." The two men made their way across the skeletal structure of the unfinished high-rise. Connor held his tablet up like a makeshift flashlight, the glow casting eerie shadows against the bare concrete walls. The sound increased in intensity, a low, almost musical vibration that seemed to echo through the air itself. "I don't like this," Mark said. "This doesn't sound like any equipment I've ever heard. Maybe it's—" Connor's words were cut off as the air before them seemed to ripple. He blinked, thinking it was a trick of the dim light, but then the rippling grew stronger, like heat waves rising off asphalt. The sound turned into a deep hum, and the space ahead of them warped, twisting into a swirling, translucent vortex. "What the hell is that?" Mark whispered, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Connor said, stepping back instinctively. The vortex shimmered with colors that Connor couldn't name, shifting and swirling in patterns that made his head spin. Before either man could react further, the vortex pulsed and expanded, sending out a wave of energy that knocked them off their feet. Connor hit the ground hard, his tablet skidding away. Dazed, he pushed himself up and looked around. Mark was doing the same, his face pale. The vortex contracted suddenly, and then, out of its center, figures emerged. At first, Connor thought they were people in strange uniforms, but as they stepped into the dim light, their inhuman features became clear. They were taller than any human, their bodies covered in sleek, metallic-like armor that seemed to pulse faintly. Their faces were obscured by smooth, featureless masks, and their movements were fluid and deliberate. Mark swore under his breath. "What are they?" "I don't know," Connor whispered. "Aliens?" One of the figures raised a hand, and a light emanated from a device on its wrist. It scanned the two men, the light sweeping over them in a slow arc. Connor felt a strange warmth where it touched him, as if it were probing him. "They're not attacking," Mark said, his voice trembling. "Maybe they're peaceful?" Connor wasn't so sure. The figures moved closer, and one of them spoke in a language that sounded like a blend of chimes and deep, guttural tones. A second figure replied, gesturing toward the two men. "They're talking about us," Connor said, trying to stay calm. "We need to." Before he could finish, one of the aliens raised its hand again, and a sudden burst of light engulfed the area. Connor felt a sharp pain in his head, and everything went black. When Connor regained consciousness, he found himself lying on a cold, metallic floor. He blinked, his vision slowly clearing. The space around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Walls that shimmered with a faint, iridescent glow, and strange, geometric patterns etched into every surface. Mark was next to him, groaning as he sat up. "Where are we?" Mark asked, his voice panicked. "I don't know," Connor said, his own fear rising. "But I think we're on their ship." As if on cue, the same figures appeared, standing at the far end of the room. One of them spoke again, its voice carrying a commanding tone. Connor and Mark exchanged a glance, unsure of what to do. "Maybe they'll let us go," Mark said, though his voice was far from confident. Connor didn't answer. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear: they weren't in Kansas anymore. It begins with Connor and Mark awakening in a cell that feels eerily clean and sterile. The walls hum faintly with an energy they can't see, but can sense. Mark's the first to stir, rubbing his temple and squinting at the room's soft, unnatural glow. "Where the hell are we now?" Mark grumbles, his voice raw and cracking. He sits up slowly, scanning the walls as if expecting them to open and reveal something horrible. Connor is already awake, his hands resting on his knees. "Still their ship, I'm guessing." Doesn't look like they've dumped us anywhere. Mark looks at him, incredulous. And you're just sitting there like this is some bad hotel room? Not much else to do, Connor says, keeping his tone flat. You try banging on the walls? You think they're going to let us out? I might. Mark snaps. He stands up shakily, taking a few steps toward the shimmering wall and pounding his fist against it. The wall responds not with a sound, but a subtle pulse of light that makes him jump back. See? Connor leans back against the smooth floor. You'll wear yourself out before anything useful happens. I'm not just gonna sit here and wait. Mark shoots back. He paces the small room, muttering under his breath. After a moment, he says, I don't get it. Why grab us? Why stick us in here like this? Connor shrugs. Maybe they want to interrogate us. About what? Mark spreads his arms. We're not politicians or spies. I don't know anything top secret. You know anything top secret? No, Connor says, his voice calm. But maybe that's not what they care about. Could be they just want to study us. Mark lets out a short, humorless laugh. Study us? What's to study? I'm just a guy who works construction. You're what, some sort of engineer? Structural engineer, Connor clarifies. And I don't know. Maybe they think we're different enough from them that we're worth examining. Well, I don't feel like a lab rat, Mark mutters. He crosses his arms, leaning against the wall. We need to figure a way out of here. Before Connor can respond, the wall behind them flickers and dissolves into nothing, revealing two of the tall alien figures from before. Their smooth, reflective masks glint faintly as they step into the room. The taller of the two raises a thin, three-fingered hand holding some sort of device. Connor gets to his feet, raising his hand slowly. Hey, he says, his voice steady. We don't want any trouble. Just tell us what you want. The alien tilts its head slightly as if considering his words. The device it holds emits a faint hum and suddenly a voice comes through, a distorted, mechanical approximation of English. Humans speak language. Cooperation requested. Cooperation? Mark blurts. You call kidnapping as cooperation? Connor puts a hand on Mark's arm, signaling him to calm down. What kind of cooperation? He asks the alien. What do you need from us? The alien lowers the device slightly. Assist in understanding. Human culture. Structure. Function. Connor frowns. You want us to explain how humans live? How we build things? The alien tilts its head again, a faint glow pulsing along the surface of its armor. Yes. Input required. Information. Collaboration. Mark steps forward. So what, you want to know what, like how we make our skyscrapers? Or how we live in houses? Connor glances at him. Or how we interact? How we organize? Your participation, voluntary, the alien continues, though the mechanical voice makes the word sound hollow. Mark huffs. Yeah, voluntary, my ass. You already grabbed us. What kind of choice is that? Mark, Connor says quietly. Let's hear them out first. Why should we help them? Mark asks, his voice rising. They stuck us in a cage. Because, Connor interrupts, his tone firm, we're not getting anywhere by yelling at them. If we help, maybe we learn something. Maybe we find a way out. The alien seems to study their exchange, its featureless mask reflecting the faint light. Decision, time limited. Cooperation, needed. Connor takes a deep breath, then nods. Fine. We'll help. But only if you let us out of the cell. The alien pauses for a moment before the wall behind them flickers again. The cell door is gone, replaced by an open corridor that stretches into the ship's strange, glowing interior. Come. Participate. Connor glances at Mark, who looks ready to argue again. Instead, he just sighs. Guess we don't have much choice. Not much, Connor agrees. But at least we're not sitting here anymore. The two of them step out, following the aliens into the unknown. Connor and Mark trudged after the aliens down a long, gently curving hallway that seemed to glow from within. The walls gave off a soft, ambient light that made shadows almost non-existent. Connor found it disorienting. Without clear shadows or corners, it was hard to gauge distances or remember which way they'd come. So, what's the plan? Mark muttered as they walked. Connor glanced at the two towering aliens ahead of them. Their sleek, armor-like bodies moved fluidly, and their blank, reflective masks gave no clue to their thoughts. I'm working on it, he whispered back. Working on it, Mark repeated, shaking his head. Yeah, that's great. Real reassuring. You got a better idea? Connor snapped under his breath. I got plenty of ideas. None of them are good, though, Mark replied, glancing around. You think these guys are just going to let us go after we tell them what they want to know? Connor didn't answer right away. He was trying to keep his focus on their surroundings, looking for anything that might be useful later, a door that looked different, a piece of equipment that stood out. But every hallway looked the same, every panel on the wall indistinguishable from the next. I think we need to buy time, he said finally. Learn as much as we can about them, their ship. Then we figure out the rest. Mark scowled. Great. So we're just winging it. Before Connor could respond, the lead alien turned its head slightly, a gesture that seemed like a signal. They stopped walking as a section of the wall ahead melted away, revealing a room filled with strange, glowing orbs suspended in midair. What is this? Connor asked, squinting at the display. Knowledge interface, the mechanical voice of the translator device replied. Engage. Participate. Mark stepped closer to one of the orbs, then hesitated. Participate how? What are we supposed to do? The second alien gestured toward the orbs and a section of the floor rose into a smooth, glass-like pedestal. A smaller orb hovered just above it, pulsing with faint light. The alien spoke again, and the translator rendered the words. Share. Describe. Explain human systems. Connor exchanged a look with Mark. What kind of systems? Buildings? Machines? Governments? All, the translator replied. Your cooperation informs understanding. Mark crossed his arms. So, what, we stand here and give you a lecture on everything humans know? The lead alien tilted its head in that way that seemed to mean yes. Connor stepped closer to the pedestal. The orb brightened as he approached, and he could see patterns swirling inside it, shifting and changing as if responding to his presence. What happens if we touch it? He asked. Data exchange initiated, the translator said. Your input necessary. Mark glanced at Connor. You want to be the first guinea pig? Connor took a deep breath. Not like we have much of a choice. He extended a hand, his fingers brushing the orb. At once, the orb flared with light, and Connor felt a strange tingling sensation in his hand. Images and shapes flickered in his mind, flashes of Earth, cities, vehicles, people. He realized the orb was somehow drawing on his memories. It wasn't painful, but it was deeply unsettling. What's it doing? Mark asked, stepping closer but not touching the orb. It's pulling images, Connor said slowly. From my mind. Showing them back to me almost like it's cataloging them. The alien nearest him spoke, and the translator offered information integrated. Human perspective acquired. Continue input. Mark frowned. So you just stand there and think about stuff and it learns from that? Connor nodded. Seems like it. Well, that's just great, Mark said. They couldn't have started with an interview or something? I guess this is their idea of an interview, Connor replied. He pulled his hand away and the orb dimmed slightly, the patterns inside slowing their movement. The lead alien stepped closer, tilting its head again. More input required. Both humans participate. Mark groaned. You serious? I'm not letting it poke around in my brain. Connor looked at him. What's the alternative? We refuse and they throw us back in that cell. Maybe, Mark said, then sighed. Fine. Fine, I'll do it. But I'm not happy about it. He stepped forward reluctantly, extending a hand toward the orb. As soon as he made contact, it flared bright again, the swirling patterns shifting and twisting. Whoa, Mark muttered, wincing. This feels weird. Just keep calm, Connor said. It'll be over soon. As the orb continued its strange data-gathering process, Connor tried to keep track of the aliens' reactions. Their masks betrayed nothing but their subtle movements, slight tilts of the head, the faint pulsing of light along their bodies suggested they were analyzing the information carefully. When Mark finally pulled his hand away, he shook it out as if he'd touched something hot. All right, we did what you wanted. Now what? The lead alien pointed toward another glowing orb. Further input needed. Complex data. Human interpretation essential. Mark threw his hands up. You gotta be kidding me. How many more of these things do we have to touch? Connor placed a hand on Mark's shoulder, trying to keep him calm. One step at a time. Let's just keep going until we figure out what they're after. As they moved to the next orb, Connor's mind raced. They were providing the aliens with what they wanted, but he couldn't shake the feeling that every bit of data shared might be another. It unfolds as Connor and Mark are led through another corridor. This one wider and lined with glowing panels that seemed to shift in color as they passed. The aliens still loomed ahead, but now, a third one had joined them. Slimmer and slightly shorter than the others, its movements almost serpentine. Mark nudged Connor. What's with the new guy? They brought in backup. Connor glanced at the alien. Its reflective mask seemed more fluid, as if the material was less solid than the others. No idea, but it looks like it's in charge. As they entered a vast, open chamber, the walls pulsed softly. Around them, Orbs similar to the ones they'd seen before hovered in clusters. But here they appeared active, shifting and spinning as alien figures moved among them. The taller aliens seemed to defer to the new one, making subtle gestures that Connor couldn't quite interpret. Mark crossed his arms. This doesn't look like a simple Q&A session anymore. The new alien stepped forward and spoke, its translator rendering the sounds into a smooth, measured voice. You have provided initial context. Now we require problem-solving capabilities. Your species exhibits unique approaches to complexity. Connor frowned. What kind of problem-solving are you talking about? The alien gestured to one of the orbs, which brightened as it began displaying a series of geometric patterns. You must analyze and resolve this sequence. Our own methods have proven inadequate. Mark squinted at the display. Looks like some kind of math problem. Connor tilted his head. It's more than that. The patterns shift unpredictably, almost like they're responding to each other. Correct, the alien said. We seek a predictive model. Your species has developed creative solutions to chaos-based systems. Demonstrate. Mark groaned. So now they want us to play alien Sudoku? Connor shot him a look. We need to take this seriously. If they think we're useful, maybe we gain some leverage. As they moved closer to the display, Connor studied the patterns. He began pointing out sequences to Mark, who reluctantly leaned in and offered his own observations. Their back and forth grew more animated as they worked through the problem. This one loops back on itself, Connor said, tracing the movement with his finger. If we assume it's repeating, that might mean— Hang on, Mark interrupted. What if it's not repeating at all, but just looks that way? What if we're dealing with a branching system? Connor paused. You could be right. If that's the case, then the pattern would be more like a tree structure with each branch splitting into smaller branches, Mark finished. Yeah, that makes more sense. The alien watched them intently, its head tilting as their conversation grew more rapid. Spoke again, its tone sharper. You approach the correct framework. Continue. Connor glanced at Mark. If we map this as a branching system, we need to figure out the rules that govern how each branch splits. Okay, Mark said, stepping back and running a hand through his hair. What if we assume the first split happens at a fixed interval? Then every subsequent split is slightly shorter. Connor considered it. So the intervals shrink as the sequence progresses. That would explain the apparent randomness. It's not random, just very complex. Exactly, Mark said, pointing to the orb. Look at how the outer layers shift faster than the inner ones. That means the outer branches are splitting sooner. Connor nodded, his mind racing. If we take that approach, then we can predict where the next split will happen. All we need is the initial interval and the rate of decrease. Right? Mark said, a small grin forming. Once we have that, we can trace the whole pattern. The alien stepped closer. Have you determined the solution? Almost, Connor replied. Just give us a minute. Connor and Mark worked together to finalize their calculations. The orb responded to their adjustments, its pattern slowing as if acknowledging their progress. When the display finally stabilized, the alien let out a low, resonant hum. You have succeeded, it said through the translator. This data will enhance our modeling systems. Your input is valuable. Mark raised an eyebrow. That's it? No thanks for saving the day? Just your input is valuable? Connor shot him a warning glance. Don't push it. We still don't know what happens next. The alien motioned toward another corridor. Further tasks await. Your skills will continue to be tested. Mark sighed. Great. More homework. Connor shrugged. Could be worse. At least we're still in one piece. As they followed the aliens into the next section of the ship, Connor's mind was already turning over new possibilities. If they could prove their worth, they might gain more freedom, and with that, the Chan. Alien script and holographic projections. A low hum filled the air, and strange, fluid machines moved along tracks in the ceiling, tending to various instruments. Mark stared at one of the panels, scratching his head. How do they even read this stuff? It's all just squiggles and shapes. Connor tapped his chin, stepping closer. It's not just the writing, it's the way the shapes interact. Look at that one. He pointed to a display where a series of triangles were slowly rotating. The triangles get smaller as they turn, then start to disappear one by one. Mark frowned. Yeah, so what? That just makes it more confusing. Connor kept studying the screen. No, it's a pattern. Every few seconds, the triangles follow the same sequence before resetting. If we figure out what triggers the reset, we might figure out what it means. As they talked, one of the tall, smooth-surfaced aliens entered the room. It carried a device that looked like a tablet, though the surface rippled as it moved. The alien approached and its translator spoke. Your analysis continues. Progress required. Further input demanded. Mark crossed his arms. Sure, progress. We'll just crack your alien code like it's a crossword puzzle. Connor gave him a quick elbow. We'll need more data, he said to the alien. We can't figure this out if we don't know what half of these symbols mean. The alien tilted its head slightly, and one of the wall panels changed. The shifting shapes slowed down, revealing a grid-like structure. Some of the sections began to glow, highlighting a sequence of movements. Observations included. Human interpretation will improve accuracy. Connor leaned in, trying to follow the new pattern. All right, this is helpful. If we can align these movements with what we've already seen, we might. Still looks like gibberish to me, Mark interrupted. You think we're really gonna crack this? Maybe, Connor said, ignoring his skepticism. We don't have a choice. If we want to stay useful, we need to keep showing them we can solve problems. Mark grumbled. Useful for what? More puzzles? More codes? When do we get to ask for something in return? Connor shook his head. It's not the time to push for that. Let's keep working and see if they give us more information. Then maybe we'll have some leverage. Mark sighed heavily, but he didn't argue. Instead, he moved next to Connor, watching as his friend began to sketch out possible solutions on a small pad they'd been given earlier. Hours passed, or at least what felt like hours. Time was hard to track on the alien ship. The two of them worked together, bouncing ideas back and forth. Connor would suggest a theory, Mark would shoot it down, and then they'd refine it into something that actually fit. The patterns started to make a bit more sense as they pieced together how the shapes aligned with the aliens' holographic displays. At one point, Mark groaned and leaned back against the wall. Man, my brain hurts. Why do we have to figure out their damn language for them? Shouldn't they already know this stuff? Connor rubbed his temples. I don't think it's their language exactly. It's more like a code. Maybe it's old data they can't decipher or something left behind by someone else. Mark snorted. What, like they found it in a cosmic junkyard and thought, hey, let's make the humans deal with it? Maybe, Connor said. Or maybe it's more important than that. Whatever it is, if we can crack it, we'll have something they need. And that puts us in a better position. Mark muttered under his breath but went back to examining the patterns. Fine, but you owe me a beer when we get out of here. Connor chuckled softly. Deal. They kept at it, their combined efforts slowly chipping away at the problem. When they finally managed to identify a key sequence, the alien overseeing them seemed to respond with a faint hum of approval. Human performance noted, the translator said. Continue. We're fine. Mark let out a tired laugh. We're fine, huh? At least they know how to say please. Connor glanced at him, half smiling. I'll take that as a compliment. The two of them went back to work, their uneasy alliance with the aliens deepening as they unlocked more layers of the code. With each breakthrough, they hoped it would bring them closer to understanding why they'd been taken and how they might eventually find a way home. The next challenge came not from codes or patterns, but from something far more tangible, machinery. Connor and Mark were ushered into a cavernous chamber where enormous mechanical arms moved along a complex web of tracks. At the center of the room was a device, massive, humming with a deep, pulsing energy that the aliens seemed particularly concerned about. One of them gestured toward the machine, then toward Connor and Mark. The translator conveyed the message, assist. System failing. Immediate resolution required. Mark looked up at the towering contraption and muttered, yeah, no pressure or anything. Connor stepped closer to the machine, examining the way its parts fit together. I don't even know what this thing is supposed to do, he said, glancing at one of the aliens. If you want us to help, you need to explain what this is. Another alien stepped forward, its voice coming through the translator in clipped, efficient tones. Energy distribution unit. Core imbalance detected. You must stabilize before complete shutdown occurs. Complete shutdown of what? Mark asked, his arms crossed. This room? The whole ship. Entire system reliant, the alien replied. Failure spreads quickly. Connor rubbed the back of his neck. All right, give us a minute. He crouched down near a panel at the machine's base and opened it cautiously. Inside were conduits that glowed faintly, their brightness pulsing unevenly. This must be what they mean by imbalance. Mark leaned over his shoulder. You think these lines are feeding power somewhere else? Maybe they're overloading. Could be, Connor said, running his fingers along the conduits without touching them. If one line is pulling too much, it might be throwing the whole system out of sync. Well, let's fix it then, Mark said. What do we need? Connor frowned. Tools would be a start. Something to adjust the flow, valves, regulators, whatever they use. Otherwise, we're just guessing. One of the aliens stepped forward, holding what looked like a sleek, multifaceted instrument. It handed the device to Connor, who turned it over in his hands. This should help, the translator said. Interface tool. Adjust power conduits. Connor nodded, pressing a button on the tool. A soft beam of light projected from its tip, scanning the conduits. Okay, looks like it can pinpoint where the energy's off balance. Mark, see if you can find a control panel or a data feed that tells us where the power's going. Mark groaned. Great, now I'm an alien electrician. He walked off toward a set of glowing screens nearby, grumbling under his breath. Connor began following the tool's readings, narrowing down the source of the imbalance. The conduits pulsed erratically, the light inside them flickering. It's this line, he called out. The flow's way too high. If I can reduce it, we might be able to stabilize the rest. Yeah, well, I'm not finding any user manual over here, Mark shouted back. These screens just flash symbols and colors. Connor kept working, adjusting the settings on the tool. He found a small, hidden control port on the conduit's surface and inserted the tool's probe. The display on the tool shifted, showing a detailed readout of the energy flow. It's spiking every few seconds, he muttered. If I can even it out. You better even it out quick, Mark interrupted, pointing toward a section of the machine. That thing's looking worse. I think it's starting to overheat. Connor didn't look up, his focus on the tool. He adjusted the settings, the beam of light shifting as he fine-tuned the flow. Almost there. Just a little more. Suddenly, the room filled with a low, ominous hum. The machine's vibrations intensified and one of the aliens made a sharp gesture. Proceed faster. Failure imminent. I'm working on it. Connor snapped, sweat dripping down his temple. He pushed the tool's controls further, reducing the power flow incrementally. Finally, the pulsing light in the conduit stabilized, glowing steadily. Got it? Connor called out. Flows evened out. The machine's vibrations began to subside, the ominous hum fading into a low, steady rhythm. The alien nearest to Connor stepped forward, its mask reflecting the soft glow from the conduit. System stabilized. Human intervention successful. Mark walked over, arms crossed. So, we're supposed to keep doing this, aren't we? Fixing every mess you've got? The alien paused, tilting its head. Human capability required. Cooperation continues. Connor sighed, lowering the tool. At least now we know we can handle their technology. Maybe next time they'll give us more information up front. Sure, next time, Mark muttered. I can't wait. As the aliens led them back out of the chamber, Connor glanced at his friend. Hey, at least we didn't blow up the ship. Yeah, Mark said dryly. I guess that's something. Connor and Mark sat in the corner of their temporary quarters, quietly trying to piece together everything they'd learned so far. The glowing walls shifted faintly, casting soft patterns across the room. The ship's subtle hum felt more oppressive now, less a background noise, more like a reminder of how far they were from home. So, what do we know? Mark broke the silence. He leaned back against the wall, resting his hands on his knees. I mean, besides the fact that we're stuck on this floating alien puzzle box. Connor rubbed his temples. We know they need us. Or at least, they think they do. Every time something goes wrong, systems failing, data they can't interpret, they come to us. And we've been able to help. Mark snorted. So we're basically the ship's maintenance guys now. That's just great. Think about it, Connor said. If they keep relying on us, we might be able to get something in return. Like what? A ride back to Earth. Mark shook his head. I'm not seeing them as the friendly taxi service type. Connor leaned forward, his voice dropping. No, not like that. We need to understand more about them, what they really want. The more they rely on us, the more we'll know. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. That sounds good in theory, but in practice? I don't know, man. They've got the upper hand here. They can lock us up whenever they feel like it. And that's why we have to play along for now, Connor replied. Keep working with them, figure out how their tech works. It's the only way we'll get any leverage. Before Mark could respond, the door slid open without a sound. One of the tall, featureless aliens stood there, gesturing for them to follow. Mark rolled his eyes as he got up. Another day, another alien problem to fix. Connor followed without a word, his mind racing. He was tired, exhausted, really, but he couldn't let himself stop now. Not until he had some kind of plan. The aliens led them to a different part of the ship, a section they hadn't seen before. This room was smaller, more confined. A long console stretched out in front of them, its surface covered in complex diagrams and flickering lights. In the center of the room floated a single, glowing sphere. Unlike the others, this one pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. What's this? Connor asked, looking at the sphere. The alien's translator spoke, core node. Vital. Recently destabilized. Your insight required. Mark let out a low whistle. You'd think with all their fancy tech, they wouldn't need a couple of Earth guys to keep their ship from falling apart. Not helping, Connor muttered. He turned back to the console, trying to make sense of the patterns on the screen. The lines shifted in response to the sphere's pulses, creating a series of waves that seemed to change in frequency. It's out of sync, he said, pointing to the screen. This waveform here, it's not matching the others. If we can adjust that, we might be able to stabilize it. Mark frowned. And how exactly are we supposed to adjust it? I don't see a dial or a slider. Connor pointed to a set of glowing controls on the console. I think it's these. They seem to be connected to the core's frequency. Mark stepped closer, staring at the controls. All right, genius. What happens if we get it wrong? We won't, Connor said, though he didn't feel as confident as he sounded. He tapped one of the controls, watching the waveform shift slightly. There. See? It's starting to line up. Mark crossed his arms. You sure? Looks like it's still off to me. Connor adjusted another control. The pulsing sphere grew dimmer for a moment, then brighter, the rhythm becoming steadier. Trust me, he said. I just need to match the peaks and valleys. The alien remained silent, watching them with its reflective mask. Connor couldn't tell if it was impressed, annoyed, or just indifferent. He focused on the screen, making incremental changes until finally the waves began to align. There, he said, stepping back. It should hold now. Mark raised an eyebrow. You're sure? No big explosions or alarms? No explosions, Connor said, wiping his brow. And the core's stable again. The alien turned its head slightly, then gestured toward the door. You will return to quarters. Further instruction will follow. Mark threw up his hands. You're welcome, he muttered. Seriously, a little gratitude wouldn't kill them. Connor didn't reply. As they followed the alien back to their quarters, he kept turning the situation over in his head. They'd solved another problem, proved themselves valuable yet again. But where did that leave them? Still stuck on this ship, still at the mercy of these inscrutable beings. As the door to their quarters closed behind them, Mark dropped into a chair. So what's next, Connor? Another broken engine? More weird alien math problems? Connor sat down, staring at the wall. I don't know. But we keep going. We figure out what they need and why. And maybe, just maybe, we find a way out of this. Mark gave him a doubtful look but didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back and closed his eyes. You know, if we ever get out of here, I'm taking a long vacation. Somewhere quiet where the only thing that glows is the sunset. Connor managed a faint smile. Sounds nice. For now, though, there were no sunsets, no quiet. Just the ship, the aliens, and the next problem waiting to be solved. Back in their quarters, Connor and Mark sat in silence. It had been days, at least, it felt like days, since they'd first been taken aboard this massive ship. While they'd learned to adapt to the challenges presented by the aliens, the strain was beginning to show. Mark leaned his head back against the wall. So what's the plan now, Connor? Keep fixing their broken tech until we drop dead of exhaustion. Connor shook his head, staring at the sleek, glowing lines of the ceiling. We need a real strategy. We've shown them we can solve problems, but that's not enough. You think they're ever going to let us go? Because I don't, Mark said, his voice tinged with bitterness. Connor hesitated, then turned to face him. Maybe not willingly. But if we understand more about how this ship works, about what they want from us, we might find a way to tip the scales. Mark frowned. So you're saying we need to keep playing along just to learn more? For now, Connor replied. If we're ever going to have a chance at getting out of here, we need to know exactly what we're up against. Before Mark could argue further, the door to their quarters slid open. One of the aliens stood in the doorway, motioning for them to follow. Mark sighed as he got to his feet. Here we go again. Another day, another alien chore. Connor stood up as well, his mind still racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. The alien led them into a new area of the ship, an enormous chamber filled with rows of tall, cylindrical structures. Each cylinder hummed faintly, emitting a soft blue glow. There were dozens of aliens moving about, their tall forms gliding silently between the structures, occasionally stopping to manipulate the controls on sleek panels. Connor stopped in his tracks. What is this place? Mark squinted at the cylinders. Looks like some kind of storage facility. Not storage, the alien's translator said. Stasis chamber. Containing life forms. Connor's eyes widened. Life forms? You mean other species? Humans. Variety of species, the alien replied. Preserved for observation study. Some are dormant. Others recently retrieved. Mark swore under his breath. They're collecting people. Like trophies. Connor approached one of the cylinders. He could see a faint shape inside, too obscured by the blue light to make out clearly. Why are you showing us this? He asked the alien. Humans possess unique adaptive traits, the alien said. We require further analysis to determine long-term stability. You will assist in evaluating the stasis integrity of these specimens. Mark stepped back, his hands up. You want us to play lab techs now? Forget it. Connor placed a hand on Mark's arm. If we do this, we can learn more about what's happening here. If they're collecting species, we need to know why. Mark scowled. Fine. But if I see one more glowing panel, I might lose it. The alien gestured toward a nearby console. Connor and Mark approached, examining the unfamiliar symbols. They quickly fell into their usual rhythm, Connor analyzing patterns, Mark testing the controls. Looks like this panel controls the stasis levels, Connor said. If we can stabilize them, we might be able to figure out what triggers the dormancy. Mark tapped at the console, muttering under his breath. This one's off the charts. Way more unstable than the others. Try reducing the energy feed, Connor suggested. If the stasis field is too strong, it might be causing the imbalance. Mark adjusted a few controls and the cylinder's glow began to even out. All right, it's stabilizing. But what happens if it goes too low? I don't know, Connor admitted. But we need to keep them balanced. If we can show the aliens we can manage this, we'll gain more credibility. Mark groaned. Yeah, credibility. Just what I've always wanted from a bunch of glowing stick figures. Connor ignored the sarcasm and kept working. As they adjusted the stasis fields, he couldn't help but wonder what the aliens' ultimate goal was. Why collect so many species? Why keep them in stasis instead of interacting with them directly? After hours of work, the room's humming grew steady and consistent. The aliens observed silently, their reflective masks betraying no emotion. When they finally spoke, their tone was neutral. Stasis integrity restored. Your contribution noted. Mark leaned against the console, rubbing his eyes. What now? Another task? The alien tilted its head. You will return to your quarters. Further instructions will be provided. Mark rolled his eyes. Of course. Back to the box. As they were let out, Connor's mind continued to churn. They'd stabilized the stasis chambers, but it felt like they were still missing pieces of the puzzle. The more they helped, the deeper they got pulled into the aliens' agenda. And yet EAC. Oh day. But if we keep learning, keep pushing, there has to be a way. Mark sighed, closing his eyes. I'll believe it when I see it. Connor leaned back, staring at the glowing lines on the ceiling. He didn't have all the answers yet. But he wasn't giving up. Not yet.